Hello to the ladies and gentlemen, and hello to Napoli. My presentation shall give you an overview about the history, the building up of a territorial defense of former Kingdom of Yugoslavia of the interwar period. I will start with a general overview and will bring some focus of the strategic concept and will bring some examples of landside fortification and also some examples of seaside of coastal fortification.
Okay. Donc la prima parte sarà una presentazione generale appunto del tema presentato, con presentazione dei concetti strategici alla base appunto di questo tipo di architettura, con alcuni esempi di architettura diciamo, e l'impatto sul paesaggio, nonché alcuni esempi di architettura costiera.
Okay, here we have the situation of former Kingdom of Yugoslavia at the Western Balkans, or you can say on the eastern shore of the Adriatic Sea. As I mentioned before, I will bring some historic mark points, some important years, mostly regarding with the concept and the planning of fortification. We have, at the eve of before beginning of First World War, there started some conflicts that changed the main situation at the Balkan countries. There was a first war at 1912-13, which brought with an alliance of Serbia, Montenegro, Romania and Bulgaria, bringing a mortal retreat of the Ottoman Empire, so Turkish retreat from the Balkan Peninsula.
Quindi la prima data importante in questo contesto è la prima guerra balcanica del 1912-13, che vede l'alleanza della Serbia, della Romagna, della Bulgaria e del Montenegro contro l'impero ottomano.
In the second Balkan War, the former allies fought, I can say, against each other at that moment, which should bring a new borders or to change their territories. We will see a graphic later.
E la seconda guerra balcanica del 1913 consiste nella guerra degli alleati di prima tra di loro per la definizione dei propri confini. Seguirò un grafico per mostrarlo.
During First World War, Kingdom of Serbia, also the small Kingdom of Montenegro, declared war with former Austro-Hungarian Empire, which lasted till defeat in the spring of 1916.
Durante la prima guerra mondiale il reame di Serbia e quello del Montenegro sono alleati della monarchia austro-ungherese.
After First World War, a new state, some multi-ethnic, multicultural state was built with the name of so-called SHS state, that means State of Serbs, Croatians and Slovenians.
E in seguito alla prima guerra mondiale viene fondato il stato detto SHS, che corrisponde a
SHS.
Serbia, Croazia, Slovenia.
Thank you. Fights didn't stop in 1918 with the end of First World War. There was also some so-called Carinthian War at the border of, at that time, Austria with Yugoslavia or the state of SHS.
Segue nel 1919 questa guerra tra l'Austria e gli stati della Serbia, Croazia e Slovenia.
In 1920, this SIS state was renamed, can say, in the Kingdom of now Serbs, Croatians and Slovenians, and also the new border between Austria and Yugoslavia was declared or defined in that year, 1920.
Nel 1920 viene fondato il reame dei serbi, croati e sloveni e viene definita la frontiera con l'Austria.
1920 also brought the Treaty of Rapallo that defined also another border, the border between Italy and Yugoslavia.
Nel 1920 il Trattato di Rapallo definisce le frontiere tra Jugoslavia e Italia.
In 1928 Yugoslavia was also renamed, now with a more shorter name, transferred into Kingdom of Yugoslavia. That year is important too, and in that year first serious attempts or decisions were made to create or to build up a fortification system to secure the new borders or defined borders.
Nel 1928 viene fondato col nome appunto definitivo di Reame di Jugoslavia e viene sviluppato il programma di difesa costiera.
The middle of the 1930s brought a changed situation too, so increased tension with the neighbor countries, Italy and Hungary. You know, Italy came into an allied situation with Germany, and also Hungary came closer to the Axis powers.
Nel 1935, con l'avvicinamento tra l'Italia fascista e il regime nazista, aumentano le tensioni con il reame di Jugoslavia e anche con l'Ungheria.
The year 1938 brought the annexion of Austria, now part of Germany, of the Third Reich, which also had great influence of the northern border and caused the fortification of this part of the borders.
Nel 1938 l'Anschluss, l'annessione dell'Austria e la Germania, provoca anche appunto una grande preoccupazione a livello della frontiera settentrionale del reame di Jugoslavia.
This works or these attempts to secure the northern borders was only short time given. At 6th of April 1941, German forces crossed the German Yugoslavian border and occupied former Yugoslavia. Also supported by Italian forces. Maybe we'll hear something more in a later presentation. And this occupation lasted till end of Second World War, till 1945. Not in general parts of Yugoslavia were freed at the end of 1944.
Il 6 aprile 1941 c'è l'invasione tedesca appunto da partire dalla frontiera nord e gran parte della Jugoslavia viene occupata da truppe tedesche e italiane tra il 41 e in realtà fino a quasi tutto fino al 45.
Now we will see a graphic that shows Austro-Hungarian Empire at around 1900 and the situation at northwestern part of the Balkan. You can see on the right side at the bottom part of the Ottoman Empire, so Turkey, Serbia, and the small state of Montenegro that also came later part of Yugoslavia. So marked with the blue field, you can see later Yugoslavia. In that graphic you can see the situation before the two Balkan wars. and marked the interest of the different states. Quite in the center there is Kingdom of Serbia, and left below Kingdom of Montenegro, and the dot line marked field that was interest to form a unit of the South Slavian ethnicities to build up one country. Also you can see Romania and Bulgaria with the lines of interest to increase their countries in that dimension. And of course Greece around the Aegean Sea, in the Mediterranean.
Quindi questo disegno mostra le differenti zone di influenza secondo appunto dell'aspetto politico o linguistico, quindi dal più concentrato con le linee, con i puntini, fino a elementi più estesi che includono anche Bulgaria e Romania.
On that graphic you can see the newly built up state of Yugoslavia. As I mentioned before, primarily it was called SRS, State of Slovenians, Serbs, Croatians and Slovenians. This is the situation with the defined borders after 1920, after the Corinthian War of 1919 and the Treaty of Rapallo that defined the border between Italy and Yugoslavia, which ran northeastern of the Istria Peninsula, about 25 kilometers southwest of Ljubljana.
Questa è la mappa appunto del reame di Jugoslavia in seguito al Trattato di Rapallo del 1920 che definisce le frontiere, quindi viene presentato appunto dove si trova la capitale e appunto le principali zone appunto costiere per la fortificazione.
Marked in these graphics are of course the capital, the new capital of the state, Belgrade or Belgrade before, and some other cities that are important in the military means, especially Agram, Zagreb, and even Mostar, which is quite interesting. And these cities had major troop accommodation or were important troop stations. And on the coastal side, the seaside, we have Kotor, former Kataro, and Šibenik, former Šibeniko, which became the main naval ports or main bases for the new Yugoslavian Marine.
Quindi vengono presentate le diverse città, quindi in mezzo funziona. Quindi qui c'è Mostar, qui c'è l'ex Kataro, che è ben famoso durante la prima guerra mondiale, e qui Šibeniko, che è stata usata come porto principale per la marina militare.
Now I will mark these areas or these borders that were threatened most with the neighbor countries. I mentioned before there was quite big tension between Italy and Yugoslavia. Both had interests to change the situation of the borders, and of course Yugoslavia had interest to secure the valley around Ljubljana and the Ljubljana area, especially in their military and infrastructural meaning.
Qui vengono indicate le principali zone di tensioni frontaliere, quindi qui a nord con la parte austriaca e qui naturalmente a nord-ovest con la parte italiana, nella zona di Ljubljana, che appunto ha provocato lo sviluppo di una politica di difesa, appunto di fortificazioni nella vallata di Ljubljana.
Definite decision to secure the borders to build up a fortification program was started in 1935, both reinforcing or protecting these two borders, so the Italian-Yugoslavian border and the border between Hungary and Yugoslavia. This border had also both conflict potential. First, to give a northern protection of the capital, Belgrade, and also the infrastructure, like as both military and infrastructure in that area. Before building up Yugoslavia, this area was part of Hungary, and had also a lot of quite big amount of Hungarian ethnic population in that area.
Quindi queste zone infatti sono state fortificate a partire dal 1935, questa zona in particolare per difendere la capitale Belgrado contro appunto rischi di invasione, e soprattutto perché nella zona c'erano parecchie installazioni militari, e il rischio era anche aumentato a causa del fatto che una buona parte della popolazione civile di questa zona era di etnia ungherese.
And from 1935 on, 15,000 workers and also soldiers started to build up the fortification system, and these 15,000 workers and soldiers were divided into 12, you can say, companies or divisions. 15,000.
Okay. E quindi a partire da quell'epoca ci sono 15.000 operai che sono impiegati per questi cantieri di fortificazione, divisi tra 12 distaccamenti, 12 organization, quindi
Yes.
12 unità per costruire queste fortificazioni.
As already mentioned before, the year 1938 brought a different or totally changed situation. Austria was occupied or annexed by Germany, and so there was a big threat at this border, and attempts started soon to secure this border, to make a large building program. As a consequence, these 15,000 workers were increased to 40,000 workers, brought up with a lot more units for building up that program.
Nel 1938, con l'Anschluss dell'Austria, quindi questa diventa la nuova zona pericolosa per il regime di Jugoslavia, e di conseguenza si prova a accelerare il programma di fortificazioni, e si viene a impiegare fino a 40.000 operai per appunto costruire in fretta e furia queste fortificazioni.
Minor attention was given to the Bulgarian Yugoslavian border, as mentioned in the graphic before. Also, Bulgaria had interests in this part of the Balkan state to build up something like a great Bulgarian kingdom.
Si deve anche citare appunto la frontiera con la Bulgaria, che è stata un po' lasciata un po' da parte perché era comunque una zona di rischio minore, ma comunque c'era sempre un certo rischio di invasione dalla parte della Bulgaria, che aveva interessi nella zona.
Well, focus on fortification was given at that 4 points, at these 4 parts of the borders, but especially at the northern parts. At least, or all in all, nearly all of the borders were fortified, were protected by fortification. So, to resume the concept of territorial fortification, will start at the land side. Primarily attention, or main attention, was given to the Italian-Yugoslavian border, so the western border with Italy.
Meno male che c'è il disegno che spiega chiaramente, quindi il primo punto è la frontiera con l'Italia.
Second was the border with Hungary, to protect the area north of Belgrade.
Ecco, viene presentata la frontiera con l'Ungheria.
From 1930 on, as mentioned before, the border with Germany, north of Maribor.
a partire dal 38 appunto la frontiera con la Germania tramite appunto l'Austria.
The Bulgarian border, so the eastern border.
E infine la frontiera orientale con la Bulgaria.
And also minor attention was given to the Romanian border, Albanian border, which was suspected or thought to be some kind of bridgehead for Italian forces from that area to break upper direction north. And also very minor attention was given to the border with Greece.
E c'era una tensione minore per alcune frontiere appunto con l'Albania, la Grecia e la Romania, che potevano comunque rappresentare un rischio in caso di invasione per esempio dall'Italia tramite questi punti deboli.
That as a consequence these primary or main defense lines were erected.
Ecco quindi di conseguenza tutte le linee di difesa appunto elaborate in funzione da queste minacce.
Situation at the coastal defense or defense system to protect the coastal shore was a little different. There we had three main threats or main tasks to withstand. First, to begin with I hope it's possible to see, Sara or Sadar was some kind of bridgehead which was under Italian government at the time.
Quindi adesso parliamo appunto della difesa costiera, quindi c'erano 3 punti di interesse maggiore, quindi il primo è Zara, quindi sempre una minaccia soprattutto da parte appunto dalla flotta italiana.
Second point is the main naval port of Yugoslavia, which also lasted, as to mention it, till after the Second World War. And the third, also a naval port, a maritime port of Šibenik.
Ok, quindi poi appunto il punto 2 che è il porto di Boka Kotorska, che è più famoso sotto il nome di Cataro, e poi appunto il porto di Sebenico.
But you can see the coastal line or the shore was not protected or defended by the whole length. Only these 3 important marks, these 3 points were defended by fortification. 2 things to mention. Also, the ring, when I can say something like a ring around Kotor, also was in addition with the landside defenses, so the border close to Albania. And another important thing is, I will mention it later, that most of these places, except of Zara, but Šibenik and Kotor had older Austrian fortification. We will see also in the next graphic.
Come vediamo qui appunto la linea di fortificazione costiera si limita appunto alle zone attorno al porto, non c'è una linea continua di difesa, anche se comunque in alcuni casi ci poteva essere un'integrazione, per esempio nel caso tra il porto di Cataro e la linea di difesa rispetto all'Albania.
So this graphic will show us the whole system, a whole fortification ring around Yugoslavia. As mentioned before, you can see main focus was given of the northern borders, northern areas, coming up with several lines. You can see the deep system of lines north of Belgrade at the Hungarian border. Also some fragments with several lines at the eastern borders, especially with Bulgaria.
Allora, qui vediamo appunto le linee di difesa e si vede chiaramente che a livello della frontiera nord contro l'Ungheria c'è una rete di linee di difesa molto ravvicinate, mentre su altre frontiere come per esempio quella della Bulgaria queste linee sono meno sviluppate.
To compare with the situation before First World War or before the end of First World War, we have some fortified places, small or larger fortresses that partly were built up by Austro-Hungarian Empire. Of course, Belgrade had older fortification, also pre-World War I fortification. Of that fortification, only the coastal places, the naval ports, played an important role, and therefore especially Kotor, the naval port of Qatar.
Okay. Qui vengono indicati tutte le piazze forti antecedenti alla Prima Guerra Mondiale, all'epoca appunto della divisione diciamo, anteriore del paese, e di queste strutture antecedenti alla Prima Guerra Mondiale vengono recuperati solo alcuni, in particolare quelli attorno ai porti di Cattaro per esempio.
And also some minor barrages and smaller fortresses, including the defenses of Šibenik, Sebenico.
Poi ci sono alcune fortificazioni ancora minori, quindi si può citare solo il sistema di difesa di Sebenico.
Now I will introduce you some example. I will start with the landside fortification of the border fortification to secure the land borders. I will start with the standard unit designs, so we can say weakest example of permanent Yugoslavian fortification.
Quindi iniziamo col primo tipo di fortificazione, quello tipo di standard che rappresenta appunto anche quello più debole dal punto di vista della struttura della difesa.
You can see on this graphic a cut section below and the ground floor of a small bunker consisting of one combat room and an entrance situation. Remarkable is that most of the Yugoslavian bunker designs or fortification design had the layout for frontal fire. You can see the armored plate, the protected impressor on top of the ground floor section.
Qui un esempio di casematta per mitragliatrice che infatti si vede che è costituito da un'unica camera unica con ingresso defilato, e si vede che appunto era concepito per un tiro frontale, diciamo c'era poco campo di tiro, diciamo.
To get an imagination of how it was working or what was the inner structure, inner facilities, we will start with the entrance situation, which is quite comparable with German and French examples of that time. We have an outer door, it's a gitter door, and a second door, an inner door, which was also projected or planned to be airproof, so gas-proof, one can say it.
Ok, quindi una struttura che in realtà ritroviamo anche in Germania e in Francia per la stessa epoca, con appunto questa porta esterna e una seconda porta interna che permette appunto di avere una zona di combattimento, diciamo, a prova di attacco di gas.
In addition, or linked, this entrance situation was protected by a rifle embrasure, and sometimes even with a light machine gun.
Quindi questi ingressi potevano, qui c'era il sistema di ventilazione, in alcuni casi l'ingresso poteva anche essere difeso da una mitragliatrice leggera.
In combination with the entrance defense, also was the technique or the ventilation system of this bunker in blue. Other inner fittings are for heating the oven and mostly two beds that are in two floors, so just above each other.
Quindi si aggiungeva nella struttura, appunto c'era la presenza di una stufa e di un letto a castello per accogliere due persone.
Interesting fact is the detail of the ventilation and the airproof doors. Some documents mark that, of course, the embrasures, the armored plates for machine guns were thought or projected for so-called ball head embrasures. So machine guns in some kind of small balls rotating within this embrasure. But of course this embrasure was not airproof, and we will see in some pictures that there were plenty pipes and openings, of course, for the heating chimney that ran through the structure, so it was not really a gas-proof construction. But maybe this ventilation had primarily the effect to get out the smoke of the fire, of the own fire from the machine gun.
In realtà le immagini dell'epoca mostrano che appunto si provava appunto a avere delle casemate, diciamo, a prova di attacco di gas, ma in pratica appunto tra appunto le aperture per la mitragliatrice o semplicemente per i tubi di evacuazione del fumo della stufa eravamo ben lontani di avere casemate stagne, diciamo, ma almeno erano più vivibili.
This inner fittings and inner techniques can also compared was standard for most of this type of standard unit fortification. Now I'll show some pictures, front side view, but I think it's better to get a view or an idea of what the front side was. I mentioned before it was concept, or mostly of them were used for frontal fire, and you can see the embrasure for machine gun protected by an armor plate with this typical round shaped hole or opening for the typical ball head.
Qui alcune immagini di esempio con appunto la piastra di protezione. Non la vedo bene, si vede? Ok.
Here we have an inside view of this armored embrasure on this armored plate. What is an quite interesting detail that was also remarked by German engineers when they documented and found up these structures, that the inner wooden planking that is lasting from the building up of these bunkers remained inside, which should have the effect to get a better climate inside these bunkers, which I can prove. So it's not typical wet and humid air. It's an interesting detail of Yugoslavian fortification.
Qui un esempio appunto di piastra appunto vista dall'interno, che va anche, se capito bene, un interesse climatico appunto per proteggere la struttura.
Maybe another side effect was to compare with German, French and Czechoslovakian fortification. Roofs were not reinforced at the lower side, the downside, with iron beams or steel sheets, which will project these iron beams to reduce the splintering of the concrete, to protect the soldiers serving inside the bunker. Maybe this wooden planking of the ceiling would have also the same effect like this steel or iron beams.
E quindi c'era anche un forte uso di elementi metallici appunto per proteggere la struttura anche a livello del soffitto.
We can see here the rear of this combat room of a bunker situation. On the right side we have the entrance gate the inner entrance gate or door, which was said to be airproof.
Ecco un esempio di ingresso appunto di casematta.
Interesting detail is the pipes in the background or in the upper part of the wall. I mentioned before there was several pipes running through the walls. You can see left on top of the picture and the top on the right side, close to the door, the chimney openings for the ovens.
Ok, quindi si vedono la presenza di numerosi tubi, compreso appunto quello qui di evacuazione del fumo.
A special construction which can be found in different situations is this pipe left. Have you? So this situation, this pipe that was a pipe for bringing out hand grenades for the close defense of these structures. Also a detail that can be found in especially French fortification of the time.
Prima avevo detto che questo era per l'evacuazione dei fumi, no, in realtà sembra che questo era usato per lanciare bombe a mano per la difesa appunto ravvicinata del bunker.
Excuse me. Here I have an outside view of the entrance situation. Mostly the entrance situation is connected by some kind of small trench, even some kind of covered trench, to protect the entrance against shelling. Sometimes on the side walls there are small chambers included, which were thought or were projected to bring some additional sleeping places, when we can say, for the troops.
Okay, per l'accesso appunto a questi bunker di solito erano costruite appunto delle trincee di avvicinamento, nonché alcune appunto zone dove appunto la gente poteva dormire, quindi alcune zone adibite al riposo delle truppe.
Here we have another example of the standard unit types, bunker types, which I guess it's much more common than the example before. Typical at all for Yugoslavian bunkers and fortifications are these armored shields with 3 embrasures. We have 2 in this example at the bottom, on top of the graphic on the ground floor. Well, this is, I guess, most common type of small standard fortification, but in some different layout, in some different design. Mostly with this typical 3 embrasured shield in the front and 1 or 2 flanking embrasures left and or right. Examples with a 3 embrasured shield at the backside is not so common. But so this ground layout was designed in quite different shapes and was built up more, can suppose more than 1,500 times at the border fortification.
Qui è un altro esempio appunto di fortificazione pensato per l'uso di 4 mitragliatrici che appunto tra varianti appunto di costruzione si ritrova in più o meno 1500 esemplari appunto come difesa appunto sistema di difesa in Jugoslavia.
So we have an historic picture after capturing of German forces, and here you can see the typical front side front side of this bunker situation with the 3 loopholes or 3 embrasures in this semicircular structure. Interesting is also the masking or camouflage of this bunker.
Qui un esempio di fortificazione catturata dai tedeschi nel 1941, quindi si vedono le 3 postazioni di mitragliatrici appena visibili appunto con questi elementi circolari, e si deve notare la mimetizzazione appunto dell'insieme rispetto al paesaggio.
Here we have a close-up of one loophole of one embrasure of these armored plates.
Qui un primo piano appunto di una di queste piastre appunto usate.
Here you can see the inside view. What is quite interesting, these armored plates are not from cast iron, they are from bolted steel and torched together, and also this, I can say, reinforcement between the embrasures, which is quite interesting detail and quite different than other armored parts from example to compare with Germany and France of that time.
Qui nella vista interna appunto del sistema di piastra appunto di acciaio usato, che appunto è tipico dalla Jugoslavia, e non ne ritroviamo esempi in Germania o in Francia.
What is also important to mention that these armored parts were only possible to bear one machine gun. So it's three alternating positions or places to bring a machine gun into place.
Con questo sistema non era possibile usare 3 mitragliatrici nello stesso momento, ma si poteva usare appunto in modo si poteva cambiare postazione, ma sempre usando una sola mitragliatrice.
On this picture you can see the right flanking wall of one of these bunker situations with the flanking embrasure on the right side.
Qui il muro destro della struttura.
At that point it's a good possibility to mention that many of these structures, especially at the former German Yugoslavian and also at the Yugoslavian-Hungarian border, and are in quite good condition preserved, also meaning that some of the technical inner parts are preserved, like this remain, or these fragments of the ventilation, of the former ventilation.
Si deve dire che questi bunker sono ancora abbastanza conservati, e molti di loro tengono appunto ancora gli elementi interni, come questo esempio di resto di sistema di ventilazione.
Also a detail of this, of the chimney pipe for the oven on the right and the left hand, the pipe, the opening to bring out the hand grenades for close defense. Mostly of these hand grenade pipes are situated near the entrance or on the flanking sides. Rather not very common is a frontal use of this technique or of these pipes.
Qui si vede un esempio appunto di tubo di evacuazione per appunto il fumo della stufa, nonché appunto il sistema per lanciare bombe a mano all'esterno a eventuali attaccanti. Naturalmente il sistema di appunto tubo per lanciare le bombe a mano era situato vicino agli ingressi o ai fianchi della casemata, non sulla parte frontale.
What is also a quite common type of fortification, especially at the barrages, at markant points, is the standard type for anti-tank gun, so against tank attacks, mostly in combination with one or two of the standard type machine gun bunkers.
Qui un altro esempio di struttura, quindi in questo caso si tratta di bunker per ospitare un cannone anticarro. Di solito appunto questo tipo di struttura era sempre situata in zone dove c'erano naturalmente altri bunker con mitragliatrici.
The embrasure, of course, is on the left side On the right side was the entrance situation, as mentioned before, also by the standard unit machine gun bunkers connected by some kind of trench. Especially in the anti-tank bunkers, this entrance situation is connected by a small chamber that is supposed to have been housed the anti-tank gun.
Bon, c'era un sistema di collegamento appunto tra questo tipo di bunker per cannoni anticaro e altri appunto quei bunker equipaggiati dotati di mitragliatrici tramite appunto questo sistema di trincee che è stato evocato prima.
Here we have a front side view of one example of these bunkers. Here the rear side in the entrance situation, and behind the fence, the gitter door, you can see the mentioned chamber for, well, I would say both housing the troops, the soldiers, and some kind of deposit place of the gun.
Qui appunto l'ingresso appunto di queste strutture.
Maybe it's better to see here this small chamber.
E qui appunto una delle camere usate dai soldati.
Here we have the combat room, which is accessible by a small ramp to come up with the gun and placed.
Okay. La zona di combattimento con la rampa che permetteva di portare il cannone fino appunto alla zona di tiro.
Interesting is that obviously it is clear divided what is a room for the troops, for the soldiers to keep a longer term. You can see the wooden planking and just linking the ramp. There is just the solid concrete on the surface.
Quindi tutto era pronto per un uso appunto continuo con le panchine appunto per posizionare i soldati.
Okay. Now I will speak a little about general design or layout, or better to say concept of a road barrage, of a small barrage. In this graphic we have the situation north of the city of Maribor. You can see the dots marking different lines. We have 4 main communication roads and a railway link coming down from the Austrian, or at that time German, border.
Qui vediamo un esempio di struttura di difesa, quindi in questo caso nel caso del distretto di Maribor con le frecce blu che indicano appunto i principali assi di attacco tramite appunto le strade principali nonché la ferrovia.
Here we have 3 defense lines, one running, or all 3 running quite parallel to the river of Drava, or Drau River. One line just 5 to 6 kilometers north of the river. A secondary line running parallel to the river, and the main line running south of it at the bottom of the Bachan Mountains. So this is quite ideal concept of a defense system consisting of more or several defense lines.
Quindi qui in questo caso si tratta di una illustrazione pressoché ideale di un sistema di difesa con 3 linee di difese parallele tra di loro che in realtà seguono la linea del fiume, quindi la prima linea avanzata che si trova a 5-6 km dal fiume, una seconda linea a livello della città di Maribor, mentre la linea di difesa principale si trova a sud della città.
To give additional reinforcement of these defense lines, more resistance power, we can say, additional small barrages were thought or project in the forefield. And at that time, at 2 of along two of the communication roads we can find even more of these small barrages in forefield of the main fortification lines.
E naturalmente questo non esclude la presenza di altri punti fortificati come questo che si trova ancora prima della prima linea avanzata di difesa.
On that satellite picture we have a detail of the situation. You can see the road coming from top left and leaving the picture on the bottom of the right with making a small curve in that area. We have three objects at that place, two standard type bunkers, standard type units, and one reinforced field fortification, a small bunker also for machine gun fire. To compare, or it's interesting that these main objects are nearly 300 meters apart, one directly sitting directly near the road, and the third object is something like 500 meters in front of this main line.
Qui per esempio vediamo un sistema di difesa appunto della strada che corre appunto dall'alto della fotografia fino in basso a destra, con 3 punti di difesa, con appunto qui in mezzo 2 bunker di tipo standard che sono a una distanza l'uno dall'altro di circa appunto 300 metri.
Excuse me. So now you have an idea of the angle of fire. So we have the first bunker with frontal fire as mentioned before. The left lower bunker giving some kind of flanking fire but also frontal fire, and the small in front of both. It's not exactly with these angles, of course, all were reachable by each other, by machine gun fire.
Qui naturalmente vediamo i campi di tiro che permettono di coprire buona parte della strada, nonché di proteggere i fianchi di ciascun bunker tra di loro.
So this is the most frontal bunker, we can say, which was on the picture on the top, and the 2 arrows marking the standard type bunkers of the main line.
Okay. Questa è la fotografia del bunker più avanzato che si trovava nella parte alta della fotografia, mentre le frecce indicano gli altri bunker di copertura dietro di lui.
And the road coming from here, crossing this bunker and coming around this small hill.
Ok, con la strada che scorre dietro.
Now I will continue with some special or the largest, heaviest fortification Yugoslavia started to build up or projected, so-called fortified groups. They were only projected or planned at the Italian-Yugoslavian border, so at the, you can say, Rapallo border.
Qui sono esempi di progetti di gruppi fortificati, come questo esempio del 1937 che era previsto per essere appunto costruito alla frontiera italiana.
Here we can see the large influence that French fortification and some French officers that were invited by Yugoslavian army to helping them to build up a fortification system, and in this large fortified groups we can see the remarkable influence of French fortification system and ideology.
Ok, questo tipo di fortificazione è molto influenzato dal pensiero strategico francese, e infatti degli ufficiali francesi sono andati in Jugoslavia per appunto condividere le loro idee.
I mentioned at the beginning decision was in 1935 to build up a border fortification system. This project is from 1937, And on this graphic we can see the condition, the unfinished condition of 1941.
Ok, rispetto al progetto appunto del 1937, qui si vede la condizione reale, appunto la situazione reale della costruzione nel 1941. Come si vede, solo una minima parte è stata costruita.
What happened in between? I mentioned before, in 1938 was an action of Austria which changed, which had to change the concept of territorial defense and fortification. So although the troops and the workers were increased, Yugoslavians saw or recognized it was not able to finish this large fortified groups, this heavy fortification within a reasonable or a time that is making sense. So this great or large projects were reduced quite remarkable. You can see originally it would have consisted of 6 combat blocks, the dark or the elements at the end of the tunnel system, including also a large entrance work or 4.
Allora, naturalmente la cosa che appunto ha impedito lo sviluppo di questo tipo di gruppo di fortificazioni come previsto è l'annessione dell'Austria appunto nel 1938, che ha un po' cambiato le priorità a livello delle costruzioni, quindi si è fatto una costruzione molto più limitata senza per esempio questo ingresso principale come era previsto.
So you can see the combat blocks were reduced to the half, from 6 to 3 pieces. Not quite sure is what happened with the entrance defense, if it was cancelled at all or if it just would have been reduced. Also the cavern system, the tunnel in the center housing the troops, ventilation, engine rooms, storage rooms, ammunition depot, were remarkably reduced.
E naturalmente tutto di seguito è molto ridotto, quindi il numero appunto di gallerie coperte, di rifugi, depositi, camere per la truppa.
Similar situation is at maybe the largest projected fortified group on top of Sveti Trigalia. You can see original design, original layout from 1937 and state of work, state of condition of 1914. Documents say it's from 1940. I would say it will make more sense, or I guess it's from 1941. You can see from groups of combat blocks, you can say it was reduced to only 2 combat blocks, maybe a third at the end of this tunnel system.
Quindi stesso esempio appunto di riduzione dei progetti, di un progetto del 1937 ancora più imponente del precedente, per arrivare a questo risultato verso il 1940-1941.
You can see the entrance situation, of course unfinished, of around 1940.
L'ingresso principale nel 1940.
And there are some examples of these combat blocks of fortified groups that were erected or were finished till German advance in 1941. Here we have one typical example. Probably most or all of the combat blocks would have looked like this.
Un esempio appunto di bunker come era appunto nel 1940.
Of course, some kind of unfinished state is more remarkable here. Of course, these structures would have been buried at that time, so buried below the earth.
E come la struttura avrebbe in teoria dovuto essere all'epoca.
When we have or take a look at the cut section and ground floor, we can see large simulators to the standard type units. Of course, they were built up in more powerful or more resistant style. So standard unit bunkers have only 1 meter of concrete for outer walls and roof, and here we have 1.7 meters, so nearly 2 meters of dimension.
Qui erano appunto le cifre che mostrano appunto la differenza di uso del cemento armato tra il progetto, che lì prevede per esempio 1,70 m di protezione, che in realtà era molto ridotto nella realtà.
Here we have a design or projected larger work, which is not sure if it is some kind of defense work for a fortified group or a single object. The staircase on the left side is maybe gives us information that maybe it is part of a fortified group projected. Here we can also see big influence by French fortification of the time, especially in the flanking situation. One embrasure for anti-tank gun and parallel and machine gun emplacement, all for flanking fire.
Ok, qui un altro esempio appunto di struttura pensata per questi gruppi fortificati, senza ingresso a livello del bunker, ma con ingresso tramite scala, e un sistema di difesa appunto dei fianchi che permette appunto di usare delle mitragliatrici.
Now we have a cut section of the upper floor through the two concrete towers, which this situation also gives some similarities to the so-called B works or German B-Werke, which are in the dimensions. In a layout, they are also two-storied with two cupolas on top, so we can also see some similarities here. Interesting are these concrete cupolas, which are a consequence of reducing costs and material. Originally they were protected as full iron or steel cupolas. As a lack of at least steel, they had to be reduced, and these mixed concrete steel structures were realized or were thought to be realized.
Qui un esempio di illustrazione di, come si dice, cupole? Cupole sì, appunto di tiro che erano anche fatte appunto con una struttura di cemento per risparmiare rispetto al costo coinvolto appunto se si fosse usato strutture di acciaio, torrette, meglio.
So for the concept of these fortified groups or most heavy fortification, we have here the northwestern part of the border, the Italian-Yugoslavian border, which shows us a main line in the center, a second or partly a second line in the forefield. So the main line here, and some secondary line in front, even behind the main line. It's not so easy.
Ok, qui un esempio appunto della struttura di difesa della frontiera nord-occidentale contro l'Italia, con la linea principale di difesa in questa zona e con zone avanzate lì e appunto alcuni elementi secondari lì e anche in questa parte della regione.
And behind this main line projected were, I think, 6 of these fortified groups. Here we have 2 began or partly finished fortified groups, the top one and on the bottom, and 1 projected. So these fortified groups were supposed to reinforce important marks, important hills behind the main line, give some kind of additional strength to the line. Six.
Okay. E 6 gruppi fortificati erano previsti per appunto dare un supporto a questa linea di difesa.
Just to have an imagination of weapons. Okay, I will just show you that there were quite different types and a lot of different weapons and systems were brought into use by, of course, in all Yugoslavian army. What is interesting or remarkable for the fortification are the second and third gun, both Secondo type anti-tank guns, which resulted by visits in 1937, which some of these guns were ordered for the Yugoslavian fortification by Secondo.
Qui un elenco di tutte le armi usate appunto dall'esercito jugoslavo, quindi la prima slide era appunto sui fucili, mentre quella è appunto sui cannoni mortai e obicivari, che infatti mostra le diverse provenienze appunto delle armi, quindi erano stati anche ordinati diversi elementi dalla Skoda per migliorare l'armamento di questi gruppi fortificati.
Well, now just 1-2 minutes to the coastal fortification. We have the main naval port, Kotor, and I will bring for that 3 examples. So we have the battery Molonat with 2 open emplaced 15 centimeter coastal guns. We have an aerial view. A cut section and ground floor. It is really remarkable or interesting, especially this battery. Documents say that part of the cavern system began during World War I, but not finished, and especially this battery may have been projected for naval turrets, so revolving turrets that would have placed at that time. Maybe to compare with Batteria Amalfi if it's known. So with naval turret, yeah.
Un esempio di batteria costiera, quindi la batteria Molunat vicino al porto di Cattaro, che in parte riprende una struttura preesistente della prima guerra mondiale.
To have the situation on the Molunat Peninsula. Also another similar type directly in the entrance of the Bay of Kotor, which is interesting. Also Austrian started to build up a Batterie Vitalinie, so the same name as the Yugoslavian battery later, which was installed just in 1915. So these guns later came into this battery. To get an overview about technique and inner structure, some pictures. This open emplacements connected by staircases to a lower tunnel cavern system.
Quindi l'ingresso con tutto un sistema di caverne, di tunnel, di gallerie di comunicazioni.
Situation of Batterie Kosacice. Also, there was not so many different countries where the origin of the guns came. Just to get some imagination, I mentioned at the beginning, coastal fortification had quite a tradition. So plenty of Austro-Hungarian fortification were later reused or just continued in the use. Picture from 1931.
Un sistema, appunto, una fotografia del 31 che mostra il riuso di pezzi della Grande Guerra.
Okay, thank you.